Hey guys, I've got here an unrated rapid game. It's a 30-minute game against a player rated 768. So I'm going to try playing the King's Gambit. I never play this ever at all. So we're looking at players rated in that range, 700 to 800. Ooh, this is some kind of interesting Countergambit, isn't it? This is fun. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and capture that pawn. If the queen comes out, I can hit it with a knight. Okay, and he's taken mine. That is very interesting indeed. So, ways to defend. I'm going to defend that pawn with a knight. It always makes sense to achieve what you want to achieve with development if you can. So my goal here is to protect that pawn. Now I could, for example, have brought my queen out to here, or even queen out to here, to defend the pawn, but as you can see, that knight would have caused me some trouble. So I'm going to develop another piece and defend the pawn a second time because it's being attacked twice. It's definitely a unusual and unfamiliar opening for me. So we have these kind of wayward pawns going off. Okay, now this is a developing move. Good to see. And black is also preparing to castle. So, but what it does allow me to do is maybe play d4 with an attack on the bishop. So d4 is a useful move for me because it allows my bishop to come out and also attacks this pawn. Yeah. So now when this bishop has to move, I might be able to capture that pawn. Bishop can't capture this pawn because it's defended by the queen. This could be, so what's he going to do? He could come to here and pin the knight, or he could simply retreat there, or he could go back somewhere along that diagonal, which would be a bit passive. Okay, so he's decided to go ahead and pin the knight. Now if bishop takes knight, currently I'll have to recapture with my b pawn. And that wouldn't be perfect, but it would be okay. Another option I've got here is to maybe move my knight to e2. Or I could simply do nothing and grab the pawn. One thing that I notice, of course, now is that with this knight being pinned, it's no longer defending that pawn. So I'm thinking breaking the pin might be the best move right now, so that it prevents black from capturing the pawn, because that knight previously wouldn't be able to recapture because it would put me in check. Okay. Now we have the knight has moved. Now my queen is attacking it, but it's also defended by this bishop, so that's no good. The knight isn't really threatening to go to f2 because the king will just capture. So what do we do here? I'm inclined just to finish my minor piece development now and bring out my other knight. I think that's okay. Yeah, let's do that. Happy with that move now. It just provides a little bit more cover around here as well. And now I don't think this knight's going to come into any of these spaces. This one might be a possibility. Then I capture with the bishop, pawn captures, and I'll probably recapture quite easily with the queen in that instance. Okay, so interesting. Black has come in with check. Okay, I've got a few options. I've got I can block with that bishop. I can block with that knight. I can even block with that knight, but then we might have an exchange of knights and then lose a pawn. I can even block with the queen. And then if queen takes, I've got knight takes, and then I might think about castling. So let's think. If queen goes, queen takes, knight takes, bishop captures bishop, then king will have to recapture. So it's not ideal. Bishop blocks looks pretty safe. I mean, it's one of the defenders of this pawn, but currently that pawn is not attacked. So let's go ahead and do that. I think that looks like a safe option. My opponent is moving fairly quickly, having made this many moves within the first 2 minutes. So I think next I might think about castling kingside, which would put my rook straight here on f1, possibly attacking this pawn. The pawn is actually on prise right now. I could actually just capture that pawn with my bishop. Then if bishop takes knight, I have to recapture with the pawn. But I win a pawn. Okay, so now I've got potential opportunity to capture en passant. Because the pawn has moved forward 2 squares and I have a pawn in this position where it would have been able to capture it on as it went past, right? So you can only, if you're white, you can only capture en passant with a pawn on the 5th rank. Likewise with black, it would have to be on the 4th rank. So does that benefit me? I would be capturing there, and then this pawn would disappear. He might then recapture with his knight, but I think that's probably all right. I capture, knight captures. I've then got maybe knight to d5. And that would come with a fork on black's queen and bishop. Could be interesting. And this at least resolves my issue of having doubled pawns on the d-file. Okay, so I'm currently 1 pawn up. Okay, there comes the knight. And now, if I play my knight there, I'm attacking the queen and the bishop. And there's also a discovered attack from my bishop on that bishop. So, as long as the queen stays on that diagonal, then black will have 2 defenders on the bishop. If the queen comes off of this diagonal, then I've got 2 attackers against only 1 defender, which means I can go ahead and capture the bishop. I also want to think about castling at some point. I might even think about capturing with the bishop there. We'll see what my opponent decides to do. Ashu is the name. Okay, so I think this might be a mistake on my opponent's part. So the queen is attacking this knight, but now I can capture the bishop. And if knight recaptures, I've got bishop recaptures, so I've basically won a piece in that exchange. Knight recaptures, bishop recaptures. Now the queen and the knight are defending this pawn, so I think I should be all right. I've got another option of a fork here. By putting my knight in there, that would probably force black to capture with his knight. Then I've got pawn recaptures. If queen takes queen, rook takes queen, and we should be in a decent situation. So I've got these 2 bishops and a knight, whereas black's only got 1 bishop and a knight. I think castling makes a lot of sense. Trying to continue to dominate the centre makes a lot of sense. That's an interesting move. Okay. So knight has come in with an attack on the queen and also a fork on g2. So one idea is to counter-attack the queen. So you take my queen, I take your queen. You take my knight, I take your knight. Now if he captures, if he captures the pawn on g2, that's going to come with check as well, which could be annoying. What else do I have? Do I have any checks? Or any major threats of my own? No, I mean I could threaten the queen, but there's no point. I can't castle, because I would be castling through check, whichever direction. That's a decent move. So clearly I have to do something with my queen or counterattack. Let's go for the counterattack idea. So he could check, in which case I just move my king, attack the knight. So we'd have knight and queen both under attack then. If he captures my queen, I'll simply capture his. Quid pro quo. What are you going to do? Okay, we've gone for the exchange of queens. Good. Now this knight cannot check me from where it is. It's right next to my king. If it was on a diagonal, it could maybe have checked. Okay, so I'm going to capture with the rook, which means that I can still potentially castle kingside. And now we've got a far simplified game, and we are technically in the ending because the queens have come off the board. Okay, so black castles, and just check for any immediate threats. None I can see. Okay, so I'm going to castle now. So now this rook has come straight to there. That pawn is threatened. Alright, I'm going to drop my bishop in there first with check. So the king's going to have to move again. Then I can grab that pawn with the bishop if I want to. Notice now I have two bishops, and that can make a big difference at the end of the game. Okay, I'm going to grab it with the rook actually, because then that attacks this pawn. So what have I got? 6 pawns, so I'm a pawn up and a minor piece. That's not too bad. Okay, I'm going to move my bishop to here, where it's lined up now against black's king. So that means that this pawn now cannot move. This pawn is pinned. So I could happily put a piece on there, and that pawn can't capture it because it would put the king in check, and that would not be a legal move. Okay, come down to attack my pawn. I'll just push b3. Ooh, and a discovery. Oh, you monkey. Right. Okay, so I'm thinking bishop to here, you see, is a counter-attack. So currently my bishop's under attack. I can counter-attack the rook by moving my bishop there. Now if the rook moves to attack it, I can capture that pawn and defend my bishop. Another idea at some point might be to capture that pawn, but not right now. So this is tactics. This is all chess is really about. But my opponent is coming out with some good moves. Some impressive play. I like it. Oh, and they've abandoned the game. Oh, that's a shame. We were enjoying that. Okay, well that's how you can get an advantage over players rated, what are they, 700 to 800? Yeah, 768. So yeah, basic tactics, basic opening principles. I think my opponent played a decent game. Let's just quickly review. Where did I get an advantage? Okay, so interesting opening. I'll have to look into this one. I hope I played it fairly accurately. 2 attackers, 1 defender. So counting attackers and defenders very important. Now we have 2 defenders. Piece development. Now I kick the bishop. Okay, that gains tempo, which means that black now has to spend 1 more move moving a piece that they've already developed, and that then gives me the opportunity. So now you see I've got 3 pieces and 2 pawns out in the board, whereas black's only got 2 pieces and 1 pawn out in the board. Okay, so knight comes in, and I decide to develop my knight. Queen comes out with check. I block the check. Now c4, and I capture en passant. Knight comes out, and then now I fork the bishop and the queen. So it's very important, particularly when you're sub 1000 or until it becomes like second nature. You've got to say, okay, well, what changed with that move? What is now under attack? And there are 2 pieces under attack. So if the queen had gone to here, or even back to f8, for example, that bishop would have still been fine. Okay, because if I'd have captured it, knight captures, bishop captures, queen captures, right? Equal number of attackers and defenders. You don't gain anything by initiating the exchange as the attacker. But this was an error. Allowed me to get the piece there, and now we have an exchange, and now the knight comes in with this good fork, and I counter-attack the queen. Right? It's very tempting. A lot of beginners will say, oh no, my queen is under attack, I have to move my queen, right, and shut out any other ideas. Well, you shouldn't do that, because there are very often other ideas, and a counter-attack is one of them. All right? You want to take my queen, I'll take your queen. Bang. Okay? Take the knight, take the knight. And now I am a piece up, My opponent's got a very dodgy looking pawn here on f4. The king is pretty exposed there. So I castle, king moves out the way, I check, and there I just grab another pawn. So it's enough of a lead at this point to be pretty much guaranteed a win, as long as I don't do anything ridiculously stupid from this point. But yeah, should absolutely be fine. And the interesting thing about having the two bishops as well in the ending is that two bishops can, let's say if the rook's disappeared, right? Two bishops, because one of them, the light square bishop, can only visit the light coloured squares, and the dark square bishop can only visit the dark coloured squares. But between them, they can hit everywhere on the board. Okay, whereas a solo bishop, so black only has a light squared bishop, that bishop can only ever land on the light coloured squares. Okay, so it can't ever, if my king and all my pawns are on dark squares, yeah, that bishop cannot interact. It's like a ghost, right? It just cannot touch you. So yeah, having two bishops at the end of the game is a distinct advantage. Another thing that two bishops can do as well is that if you have like two bishops on adjacent squares, then they actually create this like impenetrable barrier. So you can, for example, squeeze the king off into the corner with a pair of bishops. You can't checkmate your opponent's king with a king and a bishop, but you can with a king and two bishops. So there you go. So that's how you beat a 700 rated player. If you are in that kind of rating range, I hope you've got some ideas from this on how you can improve your chess and go on to win more games. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Chess Bootcamp if you haven't already subscribed. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you soon.